Can you spot fake news? In October 2020, Russian fake news factories launched a campaign on social media to discredit the AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine that had been developed by Oxford University. They claimed that taking this vaccine would turn people into monkeys. Well, the campaign was so successful, it was covered by mainstream Russian TV. Now, why did they do it, and why did people share such things? Well, for one thing, it was funny, but Russia is keen to sell millions of doses of its own Sputnik vaccine, and who wants to risk turning into an ape? Of course, very often fake news is funny. Here are some newspaper headlines from the past. You might notice that the title of the newspaper is the same, and people would have bought this paper just for a laugh. But what about this one? Is that true? You see, some people would say that that is also fake news, but what do you think? And how would you check it out? Sometimes fake news is far more serious. There are stories circulating on WhatsApp that the coronavirus vaccine contains pork. Now, the story is completely made up, but people have been sharing it, and it's caused some in Britain's South Asian communities to reject the vaccine. And the NHS has been working hard to counter such dangerous fake news. In such cases, it is certainly no laughing matter. Well, we've been looking at fake news in my Form 10R over a number of sessions during lockdown. And we've had quizzes and Kahoots. We've discussed fact-checking. We've watched some YouTube. So here is a quiz to test how good you are at distinguishing between real and fake news. You're about to see 12 news stories that have previously been circulated on social media. 9 of the 12 are false or fake. 3 of the 12 are true and have been corroborated. I would suggest you watch all 12 in turn, and then I'll give you 1 minute to choose the 3 true stories. Here goes.
Did you know a McDonald's restaurant was set afire during protests over George Floyd's death?
Queen Elizabeth has asserted she has the legal authority to kill President Trump with a sword should he enter Buckingham Palace.
Over 500,000 sharks are being killed to produce squalene, an oil found in the shark's liver, which is an essential component to coronavirus vaccines.
Cases of coronavirus were reported in Antarctica in December 2020.
In January 2019, a Chinese lunar rover found no evidence of the Apollo moon landings, proving that the American moon landings were a hoax.
Donald Trump has repeatedly suggested that his image should be added to our 4 presidents carved on Mount Rushmore.
Did you know that Amazon sprays its boxes with chemicals that are dangerous to pets?
In 2011, a group of non-violent Buddhists bought 534 live lobsters that were bound for stores and restaurants in the US. They took them out to sea, sprayed them with holy water, cut the bonds on their claws, and released them. Lobsters aren't the fastest creatures in the ocean, so local fishermen laid traps on the site for the ceremony. They managed to catch exactly 534 lobsters.
Trump's father was arrested during a Ku Klux Klan riot in New York in 1927.
Katy Perry confessed to being a cannibal in an interview in November 2017, claiming that so many people in Hollywood will tell you that human meat is the best in the world.
Protesters at the US Capitol riot chanted, Hang Mike Pence.
Mummified monk was discovered in Mongolia in 2015, still alive and in a deep state of meditation.
So, which do you reckon are true? You have 1 minute to decide. If you're watching this on Teams, I would suggest that you type your answers into the chat. If you're watching this with your family, then discuss your answers together. Well, time's up. Here are the answers. There might be some surprises. I use the website Snopes.com to distinguish between fake and genuine. Yes, Trump was very keen to have his face carved onto Mount Rushmore alongside George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. There was a coronavirus outbreak at the O'Higgins Research Station in Antarctica. It's run by the Chilean army. And Reuters photographer Jim Borg overheard at least 3 rioters boasting that they were going to hang Vice President Mike Pence as a traitor. It sounds almost too incredible to be true. But the lobsters? It's a great story. The monks did indeed buy and release that number into the ocean, but a cheeky journalist made up the punchline. Trump's dad? Well, a man with his name was cited in a newspaper story way back in 1927. There were no other corroborative records. He may well have just been a bystander, and he was never charged with a crime. So probably not. And McDonald's photo was the result of a chip pan fire in another location at another time. Here's a follow-up question for you. Why do people share fake news? Let me run through 4 common reasons. Number 1, we tend to accept things more easily if they confirm what we already believe, or at least what we think that we believe. And psychologists, they call this cognition bias. So if you are convinced that the NHS is corrupt, you will find it easier to accept a news story about some dodgy doctor. The story may or may not be true, but it's all too easy to take it at face value. And the next thing you know, you are sharing it in social media so that all your friends can see that you were right all along. Indeed, this effect is amplified on social media because of how filter bubbles work. The algorithms on Facebook or Instagram will feed you stories based on what you've previously clicked on. So the more you read about corruption among medical workers, the more you will be offered such stories. So there's number 1. Number 2, fake news plays on our emotions. It's often packaged in such a way as to stir up surprise or fear or disgust or hatred or even contempt. So, werewolf terrorizes Gloucester. That's almost guaranteed to have people clicking through, even if it turns out that it's actually Gloucester, Massachusetts, and it was just a drunk with a bushy beard who took a shortcut through a field on his way home from the pub and startled a flock of sheep. Yes, he was terrorizing Gloucester. Was it a werewolf? Well, you see this effect also from some so-called influencers. And they need to keep their fan base engaged, so they use language that's provocative and emotive. And if what they claim is just cynical exaggeration, well, that's bad for you, but it is great for their advertising revenue. And number 3, some people just don't understand satire. There's a wonderfully ridiculous website called The Onion, and it continually runs spoof stories. So, for example, here's one headline: US Mint introduces new 7-cent coin to bolster citizens' math skills. Imagine if we had a 5p coin, a 10p coin, and here's a 7p coin. Work out your change. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Or how's there one? Democrats hold off revealing that Biden died of a heart attack 6 days ago. Well, the people who write this stuff, they aren't peddling nonsense. They're actually using humour to make what's often quite a serious point. But some people, they see this stuff on social media, they don't recognise that it is satire, and then they share it as if it were fact. And then number 4, last one. Real news is, for the most part, well, to be honest, boring. Government minister announces plan to enhance motorway service stations. Okay. Funeral takes place for singer who was popular in the 1960s. Local farmer plants soya instead of wheat. But just because real news might seem a bit boring in terms of headlines, that shouldn't be an excuse for us ignoring what is going on all around us. And I'd like to make actually one more point on this. Sometimes we come across a fact or an item of news that cuts across everything we believe. So say, for example, research is published that claims that carbonated drinks like Coca-Cola are especially harmful to teenagers. And if you consider yourself a connoisseur of Coca-Cola, you might be tempted to dismiss this research as fake news. We know that Donald Trump does this all the time. The moment someone criticizes him or contradicts him, it's dismissed as fake news. Except that it isn't fake. And there is a danger in all of this, that the real news, the true news, is replaced with fake news, and no one actually notices. And I want to end this assembly by sharing an image that you've probably come across before in school. This is one version of Bloom's taxonomy, and it illustrates how people need to think more deeply about what they are learning. And so we move from simply remembering facts to interpreting and summarizing them. We use what we are learning. We start to analyze and evaluate all of this growing knowledge. We compare and contrast. We consider pros and cons as we decide what seems to make the most sense to us. And this is how we teach you to think in school. And this is very much how we should respond to fake news. And thank you for your attention. Let me leave you with one final quote from Jonathan Swift, the author of Gulliver's Travels. "Falsehood flies," he said, "and the truth comes limping after it." That is especially true on social media.